Welcome to the Fluent English journey. Today, we are going to focus on daily use English sentences. These are the kinds of sentences you can use in your everyday life. You can use them when talking to colleagues at work, chatting with friends, or even speaking with someone you have just met. At an advanced level, English is not only about using correct grammar. It is also about using the right tone, choosing natural expressions, and understanding small differences in meaning. In this lesson, we will look at practical examples and learn how to make your sentences sound fluent, polite, and authentic. Let's begin with greetings, which are the starting point of most conversations. You already know simple greetings like hello or hi. These are perfectly fine, but at a higher level, you can make your greetings warmer and more engaging. For example, instead of saying, "How are you?" you can say, "How have you been lately?" or "How's everything going on your end?" These expressions sound more natural and less mechanical. You can also show genuine interest by saying something like, "I haven't seen you in a while. How's life treating you?" This type of greeting not only asks about the other person's well-being, but also invites them to share more about their life. Now let's talk about daily routines. When you describe your day, it helps to use expressions that native speakers commonly use. Instead of saying, "I wake up at 7 a.m. every day," you could say, "I usually get up around 7 and start my day with a cup of coffee." You can add a small detail, such as, "I like to spend a few quiet minutes reading before the day gets busy." These details make your speech sound smoother and more natural. At the C1, C2 level, it is important not only to share information, but also to show personality and context. Next, let's focus on making requests and giving instructions, which is something we do every day. A very basic sentence like, "Can you help me?" can be improved by saying, "Would you mind helping me with this report? I'd really appreciate your input." This sounds more polite and professional. In the same way, instead of giving direct instructions like, "Do this," you can say, "Could you please take care of this task when you have a moment?" The tone you use matters a lot in advanced English, and polite phrasing helps build better relationships. Another important skill is expressing opinions and feelings. In everyday conversations, we often share how we feel about something. Instead of simply saying, "I like this," you can say, "I really enjoy this because it helps me feel calm and focused." By adding a reason, your sentence becomes clearer and more meaningful. Advanced English is about connecting ideas and explaining your thoughts, not just stating them. Let's move on to making suggestions and giving advice. A simple sentence like, "You should exercise more," can sound too direct. A softer and more natural version would be, "It might be a good idea to include some exercise in your daily routine." Even a short walk each day can make a big difference. This sounds encouraging and thoughtful. You are not just giving advice, you are showing understanding and empathy, which is very important in fluent communication. We also use small talk in daily life, especially in social and professional situations. Instead of saying, "Nice weather," you could say, "It's such a beautiful day today. It feels perfect for a walk or spending some time outdoors, don't you think?" Adding extra context makes the conversation more engaging. When talking about work or studies, you might say, "I had a productive morning working on my project. It feels good to make steady progress." Small talk may seem simple, but it plays a big role in building natural connections. Now let's talk about ending conversations politely, which is an advanced skill many learners forget. Instead of ending a conversation abruptly with "bye," you can say, "It was great catching up with you. Let's talk again soon," or "Thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation." These endings leave a positive impression and make you sound confident and considerate. These examples show how daily use sentences can go beyond basic English. At the C1, C2 level, the focus is on nuance, context, and natural expression. The best way to improve is to practice regularly. Pay attention to how native speakers talk and try adding small details or refinements to your own sentences. Now, let's look at how to describe your mornings using natural English. Instead of saying, I wake up early, you can say, I usually start my mornings by making a cup of coffee and reading a few pages of a book. It helps me focus and sets a positive tone for the day. You can also talk about how you feel. For example, after a short morning walk, I feel energized and ready to handle my tasks. These details add depth and make your English sound richer. When talking about work or studies, avoid very short sentences like, I go to work. Instead, try saying, I usually begin my workday by checking my emails and organizing my tasks. This helps me stay focused and meet my deadlines. For studying, you might say, I dedicate the first hour of my day to studying. I focus on one topic at a time so I can understand it clearly. These sentences show clarity, fluency, and good organization. Let's also talk about meals and eating habits. Instead of saying, I eat breakfast, you can say, I usually have a light breakfast with oatmeal and fresh fruit. It keeps me full and gives me enough energy for the morning. You can also share opinions, such as, I enjoy cooking my own meals because it allows me to try new flavors and be creative. Explaining your choices makes your English more interesting and engaging. Finally, when describing daily plans, try to add detail. Instead of saying, I have work today, you can say, today, I have several meetings at work and some time set aside to finish my project. In the evening, I plan to go for a short walk to relax and clear my mind. These details help the listener imagine your day and feel more connected to your story. When expressing feelings, advanced speakers go beyond simple words. Instead of saying, I am happy, you can say, I feel genuinely happy today because I completed all the tasks I planned. It feels satisfying to see progress in my work. This kind of expression sounds natural, thoughtful, and fluent. Instead of saying, I am tired, you can express yourself in a richer and more natural way. For example, you could say, I feel exhausted after a long day, but I'm also proud of the work I completed. Resting now will help me recharge for tomorrow. Sentences like these are not only grammatically correct, but also expressive and realistic. They show both emotion and reflection, which is an important part of advanced English. Now let's talk about shopping and transactions, which are common situations in daily life. Whether you are in a store or shopping online, polite and clear language makes communication smoother. Instead of saying, I want to buy this, you could say, I would like to purchase this item. You can also add a polite question, such as, could you please confirm if it is available in my size? When asking for recommendations, you might say, I am looking for a gift for a friend. Could you suggest something that might suit their taste? These sentences sound respectful, professional, and natural, showing strong English skills in real-world situations. Next, let's focus on social interactions and invitations. Instead of simply saying, do you want to come? You can say, I would like to invite you to join us for dinner this weekend. It would be wonderful to spend some time together and catch up. If someone is unable to attend, you can respond kindly by saying, I completely understand. Maybe we can plan something another time that works better for you. Advanced English is not just about grammar. It is also about being polite, empathetic, and appropriate in different situations. Now let's explore how to talk about the weather and the environment. Instead of saying, it is hot today, you could say, the weather today is quite warm and sunny. It's perfect for a walk in the park or spending some time outdoors. Instead of saying, it is raining, you could say, it has been raining all morning, which makes the streets feel calm and quiet. I enjoy listening to the sound of raindrops while reading a book indoors. Descriptive language helps create atmosphere and emotion, making your English sound more natural and engaging. Let's move on to transportation and travel. Instead of saying, I am taking the bus, you could say, I usually take the bus to work because it is convenient and allows me to relax during the ride. I often use this time to listen to podcasts or read articles. When talking about travel plans, you might say, I plan to travel to the mountains next weekend. I'm really looking forward to hiking and enjoying the fresh air away from the city. These sentences show planning, personal preference, and smooth flow in conversation. When expressing opinions politely, advanced English speakers often use phrases like, in my opinion, or from my perspective. For example, you could say, in my opinion, this approach could be more effective because it allows for careful analysis and better decision-making. Or, from my perspective, traveling provides valuable experiences that cannot be gained from books alone. These expressions are common in professional and academic settings and show confidence and fluency. Now let's focus on giving suggestions and advice. Instead of saying, you should eat healthy, you could say, I would suggest incorporating more vegetables and fruits into your meals. They provide essential nutrients and help maintain energy throughout the day. When talking about time management, you could say, it might help to create a daily schedule. Breaking tasks into smaller parts can make them more manageable and reduce stress. These sentences sound natural, thoughtful, and supportive, which is important at the C1, C2 level. Next, let's talk about apologizing and responding politely. Instead of simply saying, sorry, you could say, I apologize for the inconvenience. I will make sure it does not happen again. When someone apologizes to you, you can respond politely by saying, no problem at all. I understand, and I appreciate your honesty. Using full sentences and polite language makes your English sound professional and confident. Now let's explore agreeing and disagreeing politely. Instead of saying, I agree, you could say, I completely agree with your point. It aligns with my experience and makes a lot of sense. If you want to disagree respectfully, you could say, I see your perspective, but I would like to offer a different viewpoint. Perhaps we can consider an alternative approach. These expressions are very useful in discussions at work, school, or social settings. Let's move on to talking about emotions in daily life. Instead of saying, I am sad, you could say, I feel a little down today because some things did not go as planned. However, I'm trying to focus on the positive aspects of the day. Instead of saying, I am excited, you could say, I'm really excited about the upcoming event. I've been looking forward to it for weeks, and I can't wait to participate. These sentences allow you to express emotions clearly while providing context. Now let's look at interacting with colleagues or classmates. At an advanced level, it is important to sound polite, clear, and professional. Instead of saying, can you send me the file? You could say, could you please send me the file when you have a moment? I want to make sure I have all the information before I start my report. When responding, instead of saying, okay, you could say, sure, I'll take care of that right away. Thank you for letting me know. These small changes greatly improve your communication. Finally, let's talk about expressing preferences and handling invitations. Instead of saying, I like coffee, you could say, I really enjoy drinking coffee in the morning because it helps me wake up and focus on my tasks. You can also compare preferences by saying, I prefer tea in the afternoon because it is calming and does not affect my sleep. When accepting an invitation, instead of saying, I will come, you could say, thank you for the invitation. I would love to join and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone. If you cannot attend, you can say, I'm sorry I can't attend this time, but I hope to join the next event. I really appreciate the invitation. Using full sentences that express gratitude and consideration is an important advanced English skill. It shows that you are polite, thoughtful, and socially aware. When you speak this way, people feel respected and comfortable talking to you. Now let's focus on talking about hobbies and interests naturally. Instead of saying, I like painting, you could say, I have recently taken up painting as a hobby. It allows me to express my creativity and helps me relax after a busy day. In the same way, instead of saying, I watch movies, you could say, I enjoy watching movies, especially documentaries and historical dramas, because they give me new perspectives and expand my knowledge. Adding reasons and details makes your English sound fluent, mature, and confident. Let's move on to daily routines and habits, which are essential for natural conversations. Instead of saying, I go to the gym, you could say, I usually go to the gym 3 times a week. I focus on a mix of cardio and strength training because it helps me maintain both energy and endurance. When talking about productivity, instead of saying, I work a lot, you can say, I dedicate several hours each day to focused work. I break my tasks into manageable sections so I can stay productive without feeling overwhelmed. These sentences clearly communicate meaning and sound natural. Next, let's explore how to express certainty and uncertainty in everyday conversations. Instead of saying, I think so, you could say, I am fairly certain that this approach will work based on my previous experience. Instead of saying, maybe, you could say, it is possible that this could happen, but we may need to consider other options as well. Using precise expressions shows clarity, confidence, and strong language control. Now let's talk about expressing gratitude and appreciation. Simple sentences like, thank you are polite, but they can be expanded to sound warmer and more sincere. For example, you could say, thank you so much for your help today. I really appreciate the time and effort you put into this. When responding to thanks, instead of saying, you're welcome, you could say, it was my pleasure. I'm glad I could help. Complete sentences like these reflect professionalism and emotional intelligence. Let's explore how to describe experiences and events naturally. Instead of saying, I went to the park, you could say, yesterday, I went to the park and enjoyed a peaceful afternoon walking among the trees. It was refreshing and helped me feel relaxed. Instead of saying, I had fun, you could say, I had an amazing time with my friends. We shared stories, laughed together, and created memories that I will always cherish. Descriptive language helps listeners connect with your experiences. Now let's talk about making plans and arrangements. Instead of saying, let's meet tomorrow, you could say, would you like to meet tomorrow afternoon? I think it would be a great opportunity to discuss our plans and catch up. If you need to suggest an alternative, you can say, if tomorrow doesn't work, we could meet on Saturday instead. Please let me know what suits you best. These sentences sound polite, flexible, and professional. Next, let's discuss conditions and hypothetical situations. Instead of saying, if I have time, I will help, you could say, if I find some free time later today, I'll gladly assist you with your project. Otherwise, we can schedule it for tomorrow. For hypothetical situations, instead of saying, I would go, you could say, if I had the opportunity, I would definitely travel to Italy. I've always wanted to explore its history, culture, and cuisine. Using conditionals naturally is a clear sign of advanced proficiency. Let's focus on expressing preferences and disagreements politely. Instead of saying, I don't like this, you could say, I would prefer a different approach because I believe it could lead to better results. Instead of saying, you are wrong, you could say, I understand your perspective, but I see things slightly differently. Perhaps we could consider another point of view. Polite disagreement is essential in professional and social conversations. Now let's explore how to describe problems and suggest solutions clearly. Instead of saying, I have a problem, you could say, I'm facing a challenge with this task. I think it would help to review the requirements carefully and identify possible solutions. When suggesting a solution, instead of saying, do this, you can say, one possible solution could be to organize the tasks by priority. This way, we can focus on the most important items first. Clear explanations make your English effective and professional. Finally, let's talk about expressing excitement and anticipation. Instead of saying, I am excited, you could say, I'm really looking forward to the event this weekend. I've been anticipating it for weeks, and I'm eager to take part in all the planned activities. When talking about a new experience, you might say, I can't wait to try the new restaurant in town. I've heard excellent reviews, and I'm curious to see if it lives up to expectations. These sentences sound fluent, enthusiastic, and natural. Now let's discuss how to respond to questions effectively in conversations. Instead of saying, I don't know, you could say, I'm not entirely sure, but I can find out and let you know shortly. This response sounds more polite and responsible. If someone asks for your opinion, instead of saying, I think it is good, you could say, I believe it is a good approach because it considers multiple factors and allows for careful decision-making. Giving complete and thoughtful answers shows confidence, clarity, and strong communication skills. Now let's explore conversations in restaurants and cafes. At an advanced level, it is important not only to say what you want, but also to be polite and flexible. Instead of saying, I want a coffee, you could say, could I please have a cup of coffee? You can add details naturally by saying, I'd like it black with a little sugar, if that's possible. When asking about menu items, instead of saying, what is this? You could say, could you tell me more about this dish? I'm curious about the ingredients and how it's prepared. These sentences show curiosity, respect, and fluency. When ordering food with dietary restrictions, instead of saying, I can't eat this, you could say, I'm allergic to nuts. Could you please let me know if this dish contains any nuts or ingredients I should avoid? If you want a recommendation, instead of asking, what should I eat? You can say, I'm looking for something light and healthy. Could you recommend a dish that fits these preferences? Using full sentences in these situations makes your English clear, polite, and professional. Next, let's look at travel-related conversations. Instead of saying, I'm going to the airport, you could say, I'm heading to the airport now to catch my flight. I've already checked in online, but I want to arrive early to allow enough time for security checks. When asking for directions, instead of saying, where is the train station? You could say, excuse me, could you please tell me the way to the train station? I'm not familiar with this area, and I want to make sure I get there on time. Adding purpose and context makes your English sound confident and fluent. Now let's focus on making small talk with strangers. Simple sentences like nice weather can be expanded to sound more natural. For example, you could say, it's such a beautiful day today. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. When talking about your surroundings, instead of saying, this park is nice, you could say, this park is really lovely. I like how quiet it is, and the trees make it feel very peaceful. Adding observations and feelings makes conversations more engaging. Let's discuss asking for and giving advice in both social and professional settings. Instead of saying, you should study more, you could say, I think it might be helpful to dedicate a little more time to studying each day. Breaking the material into smaller sections can make it easier to understand and remember. At work, instead of saying, do this, you could say, it could be beneficial to approach the project step by step. This way, we can ensure that each part is completed carefully and efficiently. These sentences sound polite, precise, and thoughtful. Now let's explore describing experiences in detail. Instead of saying, I went to the mountains, you could say, last weekend, I went to the mountains for a short hike. The weather was perfect and the views were breathtaking. I really enjoyed the fresh air and the sense of calm that comes from being surrounded by nature. Instead of saying, it was fun, you could say, it was a wonderful experience. I learned a lot about hiking techniques and also met new people who share similar interests. Descriptive language makes your English vivid and memorable. Next, let's focus on goals and future plans. Instead of saying, I want to travel, you could say, I've always wanted to travel to Japan. I'm particularly interested in learning about the culture, visiting historical sites, and trying traditional food. When talking about professional goals, instead of saying, I want a promotion, you could say, I hope to take on more responsibility at work. By improving my skills and contributing to important projects, I aim to progress in my career. These sentences sound thoughtful and persuasive. Now, let's discuss problems and solutions in daily life. Instead of saying, I have a problem with my computer, you could say, I'm having some issues with my computer. It seems to be running very slowly, and I'm not sure how to fix it. You can continue by saying, I'm considering reinstalling some programs or asking for professional help. When suggesting a solution, instead of saying, do this, you could say, one possible solution could be to run a full system scan and remove unnecessary files. This might improve performance significantly. Clear explanations show advanced thinking. Now let's talk about expressing emotions and reactions naturally. Instead of saying, I'm happy, you could say, I'm feeling really happy today because I successfully completed a challenging project. It gives me a great sense of accomplishment. When expressing surprise, instead of saying, wow, you could say, I'm genuinely surprised by the results. I didn't expect it to turn out so well, and it's a very pleasant outcome. Adding reasons makes emotions sound real and natural. Next, let's explore expressing preferences and opinions politely. Instead of saying, I don't like this idea, you could say, I see your point, but I'd prefer a different approach. I believe it might be more effective if we try an alternative strategy. When agreeing, instead of saying, yes, you're right, you could say, I completely agree with your perspective. It aligns well with my experience and makes a lot of sense to me. Using full sentences with reasoning is essential in advanced conversations. Finally, let's focus on talking about habits and routines naturally. Instead of saying, I exercise, you could say, I usually exercise 3 times a week. It helps me stay healthy, manage stress, and maintain a good balance in my daily life. I usually alternate between running and strength training to maintain overall fitness and stay healthy. When talking about study habits, instead of saying, I read every day, you could say, I dedicate at least an hour every evening to reading. This habit helps me expand my knowledge and improve my focus. Using detailed sentences like these adds clarity and clearly shows fluency in English. Now let's discuss handling complaints and concerns politely, which is very important in both personal and professional situations. Instead of saying, this is wrong, you could say, I've noticed an issue that I think needs attention. Could we review it together and find a solution? When responding to a complaint, instead of saying, okay, you could say, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll make sure it's addressed promptly and efficiently. Polite, complete sentences like these show professionalism and empathy, which are essential at the C1, C2 level. Next, let's explore describing places and surroundings vividly. Instead of saying, the city is big, you could say, the city is quite large and bustling, with many interesting areas to explore, including parks, museums, and cafes. You can add, walking through the streets gives you a strong sense of energy and diversity. Similarly, instead of saying, the room is nice, you could say, the room is spacious and well lit. It has comfortable furniture, and the large windows provide a beautiful view of the garden. Descriptive language makes your conversation richer and shows advanced proficiency. Now let's move on to expressing certainty and doubt naturally. Instead of saying, I am sure, you could say, I'm quite confident that this approach will work based on my previous experience and the available data. When expressing doubt, instead of saying, I'm not sure, you can say, I'm not entirely certain about this, but we could conduct further research to clarify the situation. These expressions help you communicate your level of confidence clearly and professionally. Let's explore making comparisons and contrasts in everyday conversations. Instead of saying, this is better, you could say, I believe this option is more suitable because it offers greater flexibility and efficiency compared to the alternative. When making a contrast, instead of saying, "This is not as good," you could say, "Although this option has some advantages, it may not be as effective as the other choice in certain situations." Using comparisons politely and clearly is an advanced skill that makes your speech more precise and persuasive. Now let's focus on professional conversations at work. Advanced English is not only about grammar, it is also about clarity, politeness, and effective expression. Instead of saying, "I have a question," you could say, "I have a question regarding the project timeline. Could you clarify the expected deadlines for each stage?" This sentence provides context and sounds respectful. When discussing responsibilities, instead of saying, "This is my task," you could say, "I'm responsible for coordinating the team's tasks and ensuring that each deadline is met efficiently." Clear sentences like these help colleagues understand your role. Next, let's look at participating in meetings and discussions. Instead of saying, "I think this is good," you could say, "I believe this proposal is well thought out because it considers multiple perspectives and provides a clear action plan." When disagreeing politely, instead of saying, "I don't agree," you could say, "I see your point, but I'd like to offer a slightly different perspective. Perhaps we could consider an alternative approach that addresses some potential challenges." These sentences are professional, respectful, and fluent. Now let's explore conversations in public places, such as asking for help or information. Instead of saying, "Where is the bus stop?" you could say, "Excuse me, could you please tell me where the nearest bus stop is? I need to catch a bus to the city center and want to make sure I'm going in the right direction." When asking for assistance in a store or office, instead of saying, "Help me," you could say, "Could you assist me with finding this item? I'm not familiar with the layout of the store, and I'd really appreciate your guidance." Full sentences with context sound polite and natural. Finally, let's discuss expressing preferences and making choices in daily life. Instead of saying, "I like this one," you could say, "I prefer this option because it seems more practical and aligns better with my needs." When discussing options with others, instead of saying, "This is better," you could say, "I think this option might be better suited to our goals." It offers more flexibility and efficiency compared to the alternatives. I try to keep my body healthy by balancing different types of exercise. I usually alternate between running and strength training. This routine helps me improve my stamina while also building strength. By doing both, I can maintain my overall fitness and feel more energetic in daily life. When talking about study habits, it is better to give more detail instead of using very short sentences. For example, instead of saying, "I read every day," you could say, "I dedicate at least 1 hour every evening to reading." This sentence sounds clearer and more natural. You can also add a reason by saying, "This habit helps me expand my knowledge and improve my focus." Using detailed sentences like this shows confidence and fluency in English. Now let's talk about handling complaints and concerns politely. Rather than saying something very direct like, "This is wrong," you can use a softer and more professional tone. For example, you could say, "I have noticed an issue that I think needs attention. Could we review it together and find a solution?" This approach shows respect and cooperation. When responding to a complaint, instead of saying only, "Okay," you could say, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will make sure it is addressed promptly and efficiently." Polite and complete sentences like these show professionalism and empathy, which are very important at the C1 and C2 levels. Next, let's explore how to describe places and surroundings more vividly. Instead of saying, "The city is big," you could say, "The city is quite large and bustling." You can also add more detail by saying, "There are many interesting areas to explore, including parks, museums, and cafes." Walking through the streets gives you a strong sense of energy and diversity. Similarly, instead of saying, "The room is nice," you could say, "The room is spacious and well lit." You can add, it has comfortable furniture, and the large windows provide a beautiful view of the garden. Descriptive language like this makes your conversation richer and shows advanced proficiency. Now let's move on to expressing certainty and doubt naturally. Instead of saying, I am sure, you could say, I am quite confident that this approach will work, based on my previous experience and the available data. This sounds more thoughtful and professional. When expressing doubt, instead of saying, I am not sure, you could say, I am not entirely certain about this, but we could conduct further research to clarify the situation. These sentences help you clearly communicate your level of confidence, which is essential in both professional and personal conversations. Next, let's look at making comparisons and contrasts in daily conversations. Instead of saying, this is better, you could say, I believe this option is more suitable because it offers greater flexibility and efficiency compared to the alternative. When pointing out a contrast, instead of saying, this is not as good, you could say, although this option has some advantages, it may not be as effective as the other choice in certain situations. Using comparisons clearly and politely helps make your ideas precise and persuasive. Now, let's focus on conversations in professional settings at work. Advanced English is not just about correct grammar. It is also about clarity, politeness, and expressing ideas effectively. For example, instead of saying, I have a question, you could say, I have a question regarding the project timeline. Could you clarify the expected deadlines for each stage? This sentence gives clear context and sounds polite. When discussing responsibilities, instead of saying, this is my task, you could say, I am responsible for coordinating the team's tasks and ensuring that each deadline is met efficiently. Detailed sentences help your colleagues understand your role clearly. In meetings and discussions, instead of saying, I think this is good, you could say, I believe this proposal is well thought out because it considers multiple perspectives and provides a clear action plan. When you disagree politely, instead of saying, I do not agree, you could say, I see your point, but I would like to offer a slightly different perspective. You could add, perhaps we could consider an alternative approach that might address some potential challenges. This sounds respectful and professional. Now let's talk about conversations in public places, such as asking for help or information. Instead of saying, where is the bus stop? You could say, excuse me, could you please tell me where the nearest bus stop is? I need to catch a bus to the city center and want to make sure I go in the right direction. In a store or office, instead of saying, help me, you could say, could you please assist me with finding this item? I am not familiar with the layout of the store, and I would really appreciate your guidance. Full sentences with context show politeness and natural fluency. Let's discuss expressing preferences and making choices. Instead of saying, I like this one, you could say, I prefer this option because it seems more practical and better aligned with my needs. When comparing options, instead of saying, this is better, you could say, I think this option might be better suited to our goals because it offers more flexibility and efficiency. Providing reasons in your sentences makes your English sound confident and convincing. Now let's focus on handling appointments and schedules. Instead of saying, I have a meeting, you could say, I have a meeting scheduled with the team at 2 p.m. to review the progress of our project. I want to make sure that all key points are discussed. When rescheduling, instead of saying, I cannot come, you could say, I am unable to attend the meeting at the scheduled time. Could we possibly reschedule it for later this week? I want to make sure I do not miss any important discussions. When expressing opinions, instead of saying, I think it is okay, you could say, I believe this approach could be effective because it considers potential challenges and offers practical solutions. If you disagree, instead of saying, I do not agree, you could say, I understand your perspective, but I see it slightly differently. Perhaps we could combine elements from both ideas to find a balanced solution. In social situations, instead of saying, let's meet tomorrow, you could say, would you like to meet tomorrow afternoon to discuss the upcoming project? I think it would be helpful to review the details together. If someone suggests another time, instead of saying, okay, you could say, that time works perfectly for me. Thank you for adjusting your schedule. When making polite requests, instead of saying, do this, you could say, could you please complete this task by the end of the day? Your contribution is very important, and it will help us meet the deadline. When giving instructions, instead of saying, you must do it this way, you could say, I suggest following this approach because it has worked well in similar situations. Please let me know if you face any difficulties. Now, let's discuss expressing emotions. Instead of saying, I am sad, you could say, I feel disappointed because the project did not go as planned, but I am determined to improve the outcome next time. Instead of saying, I am happy, you could say, I am thrilled that the event was successful. The team's effort made a significant difference. In places like banks or service centers, instead of saying, I want to open an account, you could say, I would like to open a new account. Could you please explain the available options and help me choose the one that suits my needs? When traveling, instead of saying, I need a ticket, you could say, could I please purchase a one-way ticket to the city center? I would like to know the available departure times. Finally, when talking about experiences, instead of saying, I went to a museum, you could say, last weekend, I visited a museum and explored several art exhibits. I was fascinated by the detailed paintings and learned a lot about their history. When talking about future plans, instead of saying, I will travel next month, you could say, I plan to travel to Spain next month. I am excited about visiting historical sites, experiencing the local culture, and trying traditional food. When talking about career goals, it is helpful to explain your intentions clearly instead of using very short phrases. For example, instead of saying, I want a promotion, you can say, I aim to take on additional responsibilities at work and continue improving my skills. You can also add, by doing this, I hope to grow in my career and contribute more effectively to my team. Full sentences with reasons show confidence and advanced fluency in English. Now, let's move on to conversations with friends about everyday life. Instead of saying, I watched a movie, you could say, yesterday, I watched a movie at home. You can add more detail by saying, it was a suspenseful thriller, and I really enjoyed how the story kept me guessing until the very end. Similarly, instead of saying, I went shopping, you could say, I went grocery shopping yesterday. You might continue by saying, I was looking for fresh vegetables and fruits, and I also discovered some interesting new products that I had not seen before. These details make your English sound more natural and engaging. Next, let's focus on expressing excitement or disappointment in social situations. Instead of simply saying, I am happy, you could say, I am really happy because my friend invited me to a small gathering this weekend. You can add, I have been looking forward to spending time with everyone. When expressing disappointment, instead of saying, I am sad, you could say, I am a little disappointed because the concert was canceled. You might also say, I had been looking forward to it for weeks, but I understand that sometimes these situations cannot be avoided. Adding context makes your emotions sound thoughtful and mature. Now let's talk about hobbies and interests. Instead of saying, I play guitar, you could say, I have been learning to play the guitar for several months. You can add, it is challenging, but I really enjoy it because it allows me to express my creativity. When talking about reading, instead of saying, I read books, you could say, I enjoy reading books in my free time. You might continue, I particularly enjoy historical novels because they give insight into different cultures and important events from the past. These details make your sentences richer and more interesting. Let's move on to giving and responding to compliments. Instead of saying, you look good, you could say, you look fantastic today. You can add, I really like how you styled your outfit. It suits you perfectly. When responding to a compliment, instead of saying only, thanks, you could say, thank you very much. That is very kind of you to say, and I really appreciate it. Full sentences show politeness and social awareness. Next, let's focus on making plans and invitations with friends. Instead of saying, let's meet tomorrow, you could say, would you like to meet tomorrow afternoon for coffee? You can add, I think it would be nice to catch up and talk about what we have been doing recently. If someone cannot join, instead of saying just, okay, you could say, no problem at all. We can arrange another time that works better for you. I am flexible and happy to adjust. This sounds friendly and considerate. Now let's explore expressing opinions in casual discussions. Instead of saying, I like this movie, you could say, I really enjoyed this movie because it had an engaging story and well-developed characters. You can add, the cinematography was also impressive, which made the experience even better. When talking about food, instead of saying, I like it, you could say, I really liked the pasta at that restaurant. You might continue, the sauce was full of flavor and the ingredients were fresh, which made the meal memorable. Next, let's talk about health and lifestyle. Instead of saying, I exercise, you could say, I try to exercise regularly because it helps me stay healthy and maintain my energy throughout the day. You can add, I usually alternate between running and strength training. When talking about food habits, instead of saying, I eat healthy, you could say, I prefer to eat a balanced diet that includes vegetables, fruits, and protein. You might also say, I have noticed that this helps me feel more focused and energetic. Now, let's explore conversations about travel and leisure. Instead of saying, I went to Paris, you could say, I recently traveled to Paris, and I was amazed by the architecture and historical landmarks. You can add, I especially enjoyed visiting museums and exploring the local food. When talking about future travel plans, instead of saying, I will travel next month, you could say, I am planning a trip next month to explore new cities and experience different cultures. You might add, I am particularly excited about learning local traditions and trying authentic food. Finally, let's discuss polite disagreement in social conversations. Instead of saying, you are wrong, you could say, I understand your perspective, but I see things a little differently. You can also add, perhaps we could consider another approach that might work better in this situation. This keeps the conversation respectful and positive. When agreeing politely, it is better to use full sentences instead of very short responses. For example, instead of saying, yes, I agree, you can say, I completely agree with your point. It makes a lot of sense, and it aligns well with my own experience. Using complete sentences helps your English sound clear, respectful, and confident. Now let's explore expressing emotions in social situations. Instead of saying, I am angry, you could say, I feel frustrated because the plan did not go as expected, but I am trying to stay calm and focus on finding a solution. When expressing happiness, instead of saying, I am excited, you could say, I am really excited about the upcoming event. I have been looking forward to it for a long time, and I am eager to take part. Adding reasons and context makes your emotions sound natural and authentic. Next, let's focus on asking for opinions and advice politely. Instead of saying, what do you think? You could say, I would really like to hear your opinion on this matter. You might add, do you think this approach will work well, or should we consider an alternative? When asking for guidance, instead of saying, help me, you could say, could you please advise me on the best way to handle this situation? Your experience and insight would be very helpful. Full sentences show both fluency and respect. Now let's discuss describing events and experiences in detail. Instead of saying, the party was fun, you could say, the party was wonderful. There was a lively atmosphere, great music, and delicious food. I enjoyed meeting new people and spending time with old friends. When talking about cultural experiences, instead of saying, "It was interesting," you could say, "I attended a traditional festival last weekend, and it was fascinating. The music, costumes, and performances gave me a deeper understanding of the local culture and traditions." Descriptive sentences make your English more vivid and engaging. Let's explore giving compliments and expressing admiration. Instead of saying, "Nice job," you could say, "You did an excellent job on that project. I was impressed by your attention to detail and creativity." When admiring someone's work, instead of saying, "Good work," you could say, "I really admire your dedication and skill. Your work is thoughtful and impressive." Specific details make compliments sound sincere and professional. Next, let's focus on making polite requests in social and public situations. Instead of saying, "Give me that," you could say, "Could you please pass me that document when you have a moment? I would really appreciate your help." When asking for help in a store or public place, instead of saying, "I need help," you could say, "Excuse me, could you please assist me? I am trying to find this item and would really appreciate your guidance." Full sentences ensure clarity and politeness. Now let's move on to workplace conversations. Instead of saying, "I have a report," you could say, "I have prepared the report on last month's sales figures, and I would like to review it with you to make sure everything is accurate and complete." When talking about teamwork, instead of saying, "We work together," you could say, "Our team works closely on each project. We regularly share ideas and give feedback to ensure high-quality results." This shows professionalism and strong communication skills. Next, let's focus on asking for help or clarification at work. Instead of saying, "I do not understand," you could say, "I am having some difficulty understanding this part of the project. Could you please explain it in more detail?" When asking for assistance, instead of saying, "Help me," you could say, "Could you assist me with this task? Your expertise would be very helpful in completing it efficiently." Now let's explore giving feedback in professional situations. Instead of saying, "Good job," you could say, "You did a great job on the presentation. Your ideas were well organized, and the visuals made everything easy to understand." When giving constructive feedback, instead of saying, "This is wrong," you could say, "I think this section could be improved by adding more supporting examples." This would make the argument stronger and clearer. Reasoned feedback shows maturity and advanced English ability. Let's talk about schedules and meetings. Instead of saying, "Meeting at 3," you could say, "We have a meeting scheduled at 3 p.m. to review project updates. Please remember to bring any relevant documents." When rescheduling, instead of saying, "I cannot come," you could say, "I am unable to attend the meeting at the scheduled time. Could we possibly reschedule it for later today or another day this week?" Polite sentences make communication professional and respectful. Finally, let's focus on interacting with customers or clients. Instead of saying, "I need your order," you could say, "Could you please provide the details of your order so that I can process it accurately and efficiently?" When addressing a problem, instead of saying, "This is wrong," you could say, "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience. I understand your concern, and I will do my best to resolve the issue as quickly as possible. I will check the issue carefully and find the best possible solution to resolve it as quickly as I can." Using full and polite sentences like this helps build trust and shows professionalism. Now, let's explore how to ask for directions or information in public places. Instead of saying, "Where is the station?" you could say, "Excuse me, could you please tell me the way to the nearest train station? I need to catch a train, and I want to make sure I do not get lost." When you are in an unfamiliar area, instead of saying, "Help me," you can say, "I am trying to find the city library. Could you kindly provide me with directions or nearby landmarks to help me locate it easily?" Full sentences with context make your request clear and polite. Next, let's discuss interactions during community events or group activities. Instead of saying, I am joining, you could say, I would like to participate in the community cleanup event this weekend. I think it is a great opportunity to contribute and meet other members of the community. When asking for details, instead of saying, when is it, you can say, could you please let me know the start time and location of the event? I want to make sure I arrive on time and fully prepared. These sentences show thoughtfulness and social awareness. Now, let's focus on shopping and service-related conversations. Instead of saying, I want this, you could say, I would like to purchase this item. Could you please confirm if it is available in my size? When returning a product, instead of saying, I want a refund, you can say, I recently purchased this item, and I would like to request a refund due to a defect. Could you please guide me through the process? Full sentences like these sound professional, clear, and polite. Next, let's explore how to talk about events and experiences in public spaces. Instead of saying, I went to a festival, you could say, I attended a local cultural festival last weekend. There were many performances, delicious food stalls, and a lively atmosphere that made the experience memorable. When describing an exhibition, instead of saying, it was interesting, you can say, the exhibition was very informative. I learned a lot about the history of the area and appreciated the detailed displays and explanations. Descriptive sentences help listeners imagine the experience and make your English sound advanced. Now, let's discuss handling complaints or issues politely in public situations. Instead of saying, this is wrong, you could say, I have noticed an issue with the service provided. Could you please advise me on how it can be resolved efficiently? When responding to a complaint, instead of saying, okay, you can say, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I will make sure the matter is addressed promptly and appropriately. These sentences show empathy, professionalism, and fluency. Next, let's explore giving advice and suggestions naturally. Instead of saying, do this, you could say, I would suggest considering this approach because it could provide better results while reducing potential challenges. In social situations, instead of saying, try this, you can say, you might find it helpful to try this method. It has worked well for me and could be useful for you too. Adding reasons makes your advice sound polite and convincing. Now, let's focus on conversations during travel or commuting. Instead of saying, I need a ticket, you could say, could I please purchase a ticket to the airport? I would like to know the available departure times and any options for faster boarding. When asking for directions, instead of saying, where is this place, you can say, excuse me, could you kindly tell me the way to the nearest bus stop? I am not familiar with this area and want to make sure I arrive safely and on time. These sentences sound confident and respectful. Next, let's discuss expressing opinions in social and professional settings. Instead of saying, I like it, you could say, I think this approach is effective because it addresses the main concerns while allowing flexibility for adjustments. When disagreeing politely, instead of saying, I do not agree, you can say, I see your perspective, but I would like to suggest an alternative viewpoint that may better address the challenges we are facing. This shows fluency and thoughtful communication. Now, let's focus on discussing plans and goals clearly. Instead of saying, I will do it, you could say, I plan to complete this task by the end of the week. I will prioritize the most important elements to ensure the final result meets our standards. When talking about personal goals, instead of saying, I want to improve, you can say, I aim to improve my skills by practicing regularly and seeking feedback from experienced professionals. These sentences demonstrate advanced English proficiency. Finally, let's explore polite interactions in public conversations. Instead of saying, give me information, you could say, could you please provide me with information about the schedule and available services? I want to make sure I understand all the details correctly. When asking for help in crowded or unfamiliar places, instead of saying, help me, you can say, I would really appreciate your assistance in navigating this area. Your guidance will help me reach my destination efficiently. Using full sentences with clear context shows politeness and fluency in English. It helps your listener understand you better and makes your communication sound confident and respectful. Now, let's focus on talking about cultural experiences. Instead of saying, "I saw a play," you could say, "I recently attended a theatrical performance at a local venue. The actors performed with great passion, and the storyline was both engaging and thought-provoking." When talking about music or concerts, instead of saying, "It was nice," you can say, "The concert was truly remarkable. The musicians were highly talented, and the atmosphere was vibrant and full of energy. I enjoyed every moment of the experience." Descriptive sentences like these help your listener imagine the experience and connect with what you are sharing. Next, let's explore how to interact politely at community centers or libraries. Instead of saying, "I need help," you could say, "Could you please assist me in finding the resources I need? I am especially interested in books and materials related to advanced English learning." When asking for directions inside a building, instead of saying, "Where is it?" you can say, "Excuse me, could you kindly direct me to the conference room? I have an appointment there and want to make sure I arrive on time." Full sentences with context show clarity and politeness. Now, let's talk about socializing with neighbors or new acquaintances. Instead of simply saying, "Hello," you could say, "Hello, it is nice to meet you. I recently moved into the neighborhood and wanted to introduce myself." When continuing the conversation, instead of saying, "Nice area," you can say, "I really like this neighborhood. It feels welcoming and there are many interesting places to visit nearby." Using friendly and engaging sentences helps build rapport naturally and shows advanced English skills. Next, we will focus on asking for and giving advice in community settings. Instead of saying, "What should I do?" you could say, "Could you please advise me on the best way to participate in the community volunteering program? I want to make sure I contribute effectively." When giving advice politely, instead of saying, "Do this," you can say, "I would suggest starting with small tasks first." This will help you understand the process better and gradually take on more responsibilities. Complete sentences make your communication thoughtful, clear, and professional. Now, let's explore how to discuss events, celebrations, and cultural traditions. Instead of saying, "It was fun," you could say, "I attended a local festival last weekend, and it was a wonderful experience. The performances, traditional food, and community activities created a lively and enjoyable atmosphere." When describing a holiday or special occasion, instead of saying, "I liked it," you can say, "I really enjoyed the holiday celebration. The decorations were beautiful, and the event gave me a great opportunity to learn about local customs and meet new people." Adding details makes your English vivid and engaging. Next, let's focus on making polite requests in public or community settings. Instead of saying, "Give me that," you could say, "Could you please provide me with information about the upcoming workshops? I want to make sure I do not miss any sessions that could be useful for my learning." When asking for guidance, instead of saying, "Help me," you can say, "I would greatly appreciate your assistance in understanding the schedule and requirements for the event. Your guidance will help me participate more effectively." Full sentences with context show politeness and clarity. Finally, let's explore giving opinions and suggestions during community discussions. Instead of saying, "I think this is good," you could say, "I believe this initiative is very valuable because it encourages community engagement and helps people develop new skills." When offering an alternative idea, instead of saying, "Do it like this," you can say, "Perhaps we could try a slightly different approach that might be more efficient and inclusive for everyone involved." Using full sentences with clear reasoning shows advanced English skills and thoughtful communication. It helps your listener understand not only what you are saying, but also why you are saying it. Let's begin by talking about expressing gratitude and appreciation in social situations. Instead of simply saying, thanks, you can say, thank you very much for organizing this event. I truly appreciate the time and effort you put into making it enjoyable for everyone. When responding to someone's help or kindness, instead of saying, no problem, you can say, it was my pleasure to assist you. I am glad I could help, and I hope everything worked out smoothly. Using full sentences with context makes your English sound polite, warm, and natural. Now, let's focus on describing experiences in public spaces. Instead of saying, I went to the museum, you could say, I visited the city museum yesterday. The exhibits were very informative, and I learned a great deal about the history and culture of the area. When talking about parks or gardens, instead of saying, it is beautiful, you can say, the botanical garden is absolutely stunning. The variety of plants and flowers, along with the well-maintained pathways, made my visit relaxing and enjoyable. Descriptive sentences like these improve fluency and keep your listener engaged. Next, let's explore how to handle problems or complaints politely in public or community settings. Instead of saying, this is wrong, you could say, I have encountered an issue that I hope can be resolved. Could you please advise me on the appropriate steps to address it? When raising a concern, instead of saying, fix it, you can say, I would appreciate it if this matter could be looked into. Your assistance will help ensure the issue is resolved efficiently and fairly. Complete sentences show professionalism, clarity, and respect. Now, let's talk about expressing emotions and reactions naturally. Instead of saying, I am happy, you could say, I feel delighted to be part of this event. The positive energy and friendly interactions have made it a truly enjoyable experience. When expressing surprise, instead of saying, wow, you can say, I am genuinely surprised by how well organized this event is. The attention to detail and the variety of activities exceeded my expectations. Adding explanation makes your sentences sound authentic and advanced. Next, we will discuss making plans and arrangements with friends or community members. Instead of saying, let's meet later, you could say, would you like to meet later this afternoon to discuss the upcoming community project? I think it would be helpful to review the plans together. If someone suggests a different time, instead of saying, okay, you can say, that time works well for me. Thank you for adjusting your schedule, and I look forward to our meeting. Thoughtful sentences show fluency and social awareness. Now, let's focus on asking for opinions and feedback. Instead of saying, what do you think? You could say, I would like to hear your thoughts on the proposed project. Do you think it will be effective, or should we consider other alternatives? When asking for advice politely, instead of saying, help me, you can say, could you please provide your guidance on how to approach this task? Your experience and insight would be very valuable. Complete sentences show respect and strong language skills. Next, let's explore giving clear explanations and instructions in community or public activities. Instead of saying, do it like this, you could say, I suggest following this procedure step by step. This will help ensure the task is completed correctly and efficiently. When explaining something to someone unfamiliar, instead of saying, this is easy, you can say, although the process may seem complicated at first, taking it one step at a time makes it manageable and straightforward. Clear sentences make your communication professional and easy to understand. And now, we have reached the end of today's episode on daily use sentences for advanced English learners. In this episode of Fluent English Journey, we explored many real-life situations, including professional conversations, casual discussions with friends, public interactions, and community engagement. You learned how to use full, polite, and meaningful sentences to express ideas, give and receive feedback, ask for help, describe experiences, and communicate with confidence. Remember, mastering advanced English is not only about vocabulary and grammar. It is about using complete and thoughtful sentences that provide context, show respect, and clearly express your ideas. Practice these sentences in your daily life. Adjust them to fit your own situations, and do not be afraid to try new expressions. The more you practice, the more natural and confident your English will become. Thank you for listening to this episode of Fluent English Journey. Keep practicing, stay curious, and continue improving your English every day. We hope this episode helps you feel confident, fluent, and comfortable using English in any situation. See you in the next episode.